Hi, I'm Pluto.
Hi, Pluto.
I like to make music and study music composition and production. And for most of my life, I've been a pretty horrible perfectionist and procrastinator. Like, I mostly don't finish what I start, and most of the school assignments I've handed in were submitted at the last minute or overdue, and never properly finished, usually resulting in some form of disappointment with myself. And then at the start of this year, the same thing happened, but this time it was a bigger assignment, or maybe I should say project. And this project was pretty important to me, so this time the disappointment hit me a little harder. And so I finally thought, okay, if someone would actually want to reach their goals in, I guess, any creative outlet, in most cases this perfectionism will only prevent someone from reaching them. And yes, this realization probably took way too long. Now, what do I actually mean when I say perfectionism? Well, going off from Wikipedia and my personal experience working on things, I'm talking about a cycle of setting unattainable goals, inevitably failing to meet them, but then still measuring one's own self-worth by what is produced in the end, leading to low self-esteem. Now, it's probably not impossible to reach one's goals with perfectionism. I mean, your mileage may vary, and I'm certainly not an expert on this, but I think I can safely claim it's not the most effective way of working on things. Thank you. Okay, with that out of the way, how does one deal with something like perfectionism? Well, some months ago, while working on that bigger project, I came across this YouTube guy called Mizizizis, and he's a game developer and swing dancer. Well, he's got this video called How to Become a Really Good Game Developer in Under a Year, which very nicely goes straight to the point. And in it, he lays out the following path, starting with watch 1 or 2 tutorials every day for about 2 to 3 months. And then he focuses on something he expands on in his first Q&A video, seeing finishing things as a skill, referring to a blog post by the game developer Derek Yu, who you may or may not know as the creator of the indie game Spelunky. And in this blog post, Derek Yu says, "We've all had that feeling about at least one game, comic book, movie, etc. that comes out. Gee, I could do better than this is overrated. But it's important to take a step back and realize that, hey, they put in the time to finish a project and I haven't. That's at least one thing they might be better than me at, and it's probably why they have the recognition I don't. If you treat finishing like a skill, rather than simply a step in the process, you can acknowledge not only that it's something you can get better at, but also what habits and thought processes get in your way." And then he gives the reader 15 tips for finishing a game. Now back to Mizizizis. Because treating finishing things as a skill is the most important part behind the beginning of this process in becoming a really good game developer in under a year. So he says to watch tutorials, then make a game in 1 hour, then one in 2 days, then in 1 week, then in 2 weeks, and repeat. And this will not only give you a lot of practice with making things and finishing those things, but it'll also give you a really good sense of what you're capable of doing in these time frames and what obstacles you might come across doing it, which also really helps if you're going to be working with or for other people. You'll be able to give them, and in the end also yourself, more realistic goals and more realistic estimates. And there's more steps laid out in the video, but this got me thinking. Suddenly, there's a more important goal than trying to make something that's good. Now, because of these time frames, it's actually more important to finish something. Of course, you'll be striving to make something that's good, but you're kind of focusing more on quantity. And this reminds me of a story that I heard from YouTuber Strutless, or Struthless. I'm gonna say Struthless because it sounds more Australian English and he's Australian. And it's a story that's often cited around the internet, so you may have heard it already. I found what I think is the original version on Austin Kleon's website, where he quoted a passage from the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. So this photography professor at the University of Florida, Jerry Ulsman, said he once divided his film photography students into 2 groups at the beginning of a term. One group would be graded on the amount of photos they took. They were the quantity group. The other group was the quality group. They would be graded only on the quality of 1 photo. And at the end of the term, Ulsman found that all the best photos were taken by the quantity group. And James Clear writes, during the semester, the students from the quantity group were busy taking photos, experimenting with composition and lighting, testing out various methods in the darkroom, and learning from their mistakes. In the process of creating hundreds of photos, they honed their skills. Meanwhile, the quality group sat around speculating about perfection. In the end, they had little to show for their efforts other than unverified theories and 1 mediocre photo. So quantity eventually leads to quality. And this may sound stupidly logical, but for me it was very important to hear. Okay, but how do you apply this stuff when working on a project that's important to you? If it's important to you, you can't just go and finish it quickly like the more fun projects, right? Then it's different. Well, I thought about this for a day or so and came to the conclusion that I think there's not really a difference. If your skill level isn't yet adequate for the goal you're setting, then it probably won't help that much to be overly perfectionistic about it. Struthless, the other YouTube guy, has a video about perfectionism and procrastination, where he talks about the law of diminishing returns, a term stemming from economics, and he uses it to explain why it probably won't help that much to be overly perfectionistic about creating something. The concept doesn't totally match, but the main idea holds, I think. So the idea is that when you start to work on something, you put time and effort into it, thereby making it better. But after some point, called the point of diminishing returns, the same amount of time you're putting into it leads to lower and lower increases in quality. And eventually, after another point, the point of maximum yield, you're only hurting the amount of things you actually finish, putting a lot of time into something that's only getting hardly better, or maybe even plateauing. And I think this plateauing might happen because it takes more time than the scope of one project to actually get better at things. And also, I think it's important to go through the whole process of creating something when you want to get better. If you're constantly stuck in a certain phase, then you're probably going to be learning at a slower rate. So you have to get out at that last point or somewhere before that last point. And when you do this, you're actually finishing things, giving you all of the benefits that come with that, including actually being able to share something with others, thereby being able to express yourself in some way to them, building self-confidence, and the other points I talked about earlier. And this is why Struthless gives us the 70% rule. Aim for 70% done or good, not 100%. And he gives us 4 reasons for this. 1. It lowers the barrier to entry. It's easier to start something with the goal of making it above average than something that's perfect. 2. The law of diminishing returns. 3. It helps you finish. And 4. It reinforces the truth that the world doesn't hate you for making something that's not perfect. And you can practice this 70% rule by just doing it a lot, seeing it as just another skill you're learning. Or seeing it a bit like exposure therapy, in which you repeatedly expose yourself to the source of your anxiety, for example spiders, thereby gradually reducing the fear of that particular thing. Does fear of failure ring a bell? Now, this is just me paraphrasing people and thinking out loud, so I don't know how much of this is actually true, but I think it might be possible to kind of try this out with a small project. So let's do that. I'm going to try and make an EP consisting of 4 songs that, to me, and hopefully to you, feel like they express the things I want them to express and that are well crafted. They have reached that feeling of being at least 70% done or good. To keep myself in check, I'll have 2 weeks to finish each song, hopefully reaching 70% or more. And after those 2 weeks, I'll have 1 more week to make a video about the process of making the song, the problems I encountered, the solutions I may have come up with, and whatever else I came across that I thought was interesting. And yes, for this too, I'm aiming for 70%. I'll choose some basic instrumentation to keep the scope limited, so that reaching 70% sounds like a doable goal. Let's do piano, microtonic, a sound design tool for creating your own electronic percussion, the percussion instruments I have in my room, my voice, body, like singing, clapping, snapping, rapping, whatever. And each song can have 1 extra flavor like a synth, guitar, granulator, sample, etc. And this also helps because usually limiting the choices you can make helps with actually making choices. To help me write lyrics, I'll use the concept of a fictional island. And for the 4 songs, I'll focus on 4 locations on the island. The island's city, harbor, beach, and volcano. And for each location, I'll write a song that's inspired by it. And these songs don't need to be about the location, they just need to be connected in some way that feels like it makes sense. They're starting points for topics. For example, the volcano song could be about frustration, or anger, or undealt with and suppressed feelings, or being enthusiastic about something, being in love, sex, whatever. And I like creating contexts like this because it can take away some of the abstraction that's inherent to music. It can help the listener understand some of the musical choices made, and as I kind of said already, it can inform me about what musical and lyrical choices I can make. Limits, again, and something I'd like to explore more fully in the future. I'm not sure yet what kind of music I'm going to be making, but since we're dealing with an island here, I'm thinking along the lines of Japanese city pop, some of Joe Hisaishi's soundtracks, and some of Takagi Masakatsu's soundtracks, and maybe the new Porter Robinson album too. The game is Short Hike, which takes place on an island, has been on my radar for a short while now, so I'm going to be checking it and its soundtrack out too. So, what's a good way to tackle 2 weeks of writing a song? Well, I've often heard that a lot of famous creatives and scientists from the past worked around 4 hours a day. And in the books Deep Work by Cal Newport and Rest by Alex Pang, they write that around 4 hours a day seems to be the limit for cognitively demanding work, both referring to the research done by the late psychologist Anders Ericsson and his work on human expertise and deliberate practice, which is a very effective but also cognitively demanding way of practicing. Important to note is that the work done during these 4 hours should be distraction-free to help you get in a state of deep focus or deep work, hence the title of Newport's book. And of course, taking breaks is important too. So assuming making music is cognitively demanding, I'm curious as to what would happen if I would apply this. So let's say I work 6 days a week on a song for 2 weeks. If I'm working 4 hours a day, that gives me 48 hours to finish a song, and I'm pretty sure that's enough. And on the video, I'll work 6 days too, so that's 24 hours. And maybe this is too short of a time, but I'm planning the next videos to be of a shorter length than this one, so maybe it isn't, who knows. Of course, some of the things I'll be doing will be less cognitively demanding, but for the sake of being clear in the challenge I'm setting out of fighting perfectionism, I think holding on to 4 hours a day is a good thing. And it could very well be that some parts in the next video or song might feel rushed or unfinished, but that's kind of the point. Also, I may have to move before I'll be able to finish this project, so I'll probably need an extra week or so when that happens. So, we'll tackle this on a per song basis, if that's the correct term. Okay, with that set up, let's actually start. First location, the city. Next episode in 3 weeks. Bye bye.